Chapter 1. Jessica. The first sign that the world was about to come to an end was when Jessica's teenage children informed her that prom had been canceled. Canceled? Jessica asked, as she handed out bag lunches. What on earth for? Too many kids have the flu, Dylan, her 14-year-old, said. Jessica looked at Kayla for confirmation. 16 and about to attend her first prom, Kayla frowned. It sucks. That's because you won't be able to make out with Ethan now. Dylan made kissing noises to emphasize his point. Kayla swatted at him. Stop it. Both of you stop it, Jessica said. You're going to make me late for work. She loved her job as a dental hygienist, but now that she thought about it, a lot of patients had canceled due to illness. Maybe her family should stay home for a day or two. Let whatever bug that was going around pass them by. None of them could afford to get sick. Then she thought about Matt, her husband. He'd gone to work already. He was a software developer, and Jessica knew he'd been stressed with all the work he had on his plate. Maybe she could convince him to work from home, something he did from time to time. Sighing, she set her purse on the counter. Okay, family meeting. Wait, Dylan said. We can't have a family meeting without Dad. I know, but this is different. He's not here, and this seems like kind of an emergency. An emergency that there's no prom? Dylan rolled his eyes. It is an emergency, Kayla said. No, Jessica said. Not because of prom, because of this flu. I've heard a few news reports that it's pretty nasty, and it sounds like it's really going around. Maybe, was this really the best idea? Maybe we should all kind of hunker down for a few days until it's... Yes, Dylan said, cutting Jessica off. No school! Woohoo! Kayla looked less certain. What about, missing all the stuff my teachers will be teaching? Dylan laughed. You just don't want to miss seeing Ethan. Kayla huffed out a protest, but Jessica knew what Dylan said was probably true. You can keep in touch with your friends, Jessica said. Just not in person. Kayla's lips compressed. Jessica smiled. Let me call Dad and see what he says. Dylan had already set his lunch bag on the counter and dropped his backpack on the floor. But we're not going to school today, right? Was Matt going to tell her she was being overly dramatic? Maybe, but in her gut, she knew this was the right thing to do. Yes, no school today. Woot, woot, Dylan shouted as he pumped a fist in the air before racing for the stairs. Do you really think we can get sick? Kayla asked, her forehead furrowed. Though Jessica was concerned, she didn't want her kids to worry. Not if we stay away from sick people. Mom, Kayla said as she rolled her eyes. Let me call Dad, okay? Kayla nodded. Then she flopped onto the couch with her phone already in her hand. Jessica went upstairs to the master bedroom and closed the door before calling her husband's cell. He answered on the second ring. What's up, honey? I'm just about to head into a meeting. Jessica pictured her husband, 6 feet tall, relatively fit, and still as handsome as the day she'd met him. I was, wondering if you could work from your home office today, and maybe tomorrow. What? His tone showed he thought she was nuts. Why would I do that? Have any of your co-workers called in sick lately? He paused. A few people have, yeah. More than normal? I guess so, yeah. Honey, the kids' school canceled prom because so many kids have that flu that's going around. Just to be safe, I'm keeping them home for a few days. I'm going to stay home too. Really? Shock was evident in his voice. You never miss work. I know. She heard noise in the background. It sounded like Matt had shifted the phone away from his mouth. Hey, he said, I've got to go. I'll call you after my meeting. All right, but think about it. Working from home, I mean. Okay, bye. Next, she called the dentist's office where she worked to let them know she wasn't coming in. "Are you sick too?" Rochelle, her co-worker, asked. "Too? Who else is sick?" Rochelle named several others who worked there. Hearing the names of so many people she knew who were sick sent a beat of concern through her. "No," Jessica said. "I'm not sick, just trying to stay that way." "Maybe you're on to something there." Jessica thought about her coworker and friend. Rochelle was 16 weeks pregnant with her first baby. If she caught this flu, could it put her baby in jeopardy? "Maybe you ought to head home, Rochelle, just in case." Sighing heavily, she said, "I can't afford to take any more time off. You know how much time I took off when I was so sick at the beginning of the pregnancy? I used all my sick days." Jessica bit her lip. "Just, I don't know. Be safe, okay?" Rochelle chuckled. "I'm sure I'll be fine." They disconnected, and Jessica set her phone on her bedside table before turning on the news. Concerned about how quickly this flu is spreading, the news reporter was saying. Jessica turned up the volume. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reports that this strain has resulted in higher than average fatalities, and they remind people to take sanitary measures after being around other people. Wash your hands frequently, cover your mouth when you cough or sneeze, and if you or a family member has any symptoms, stay home for at least 72 hours after the symptoms have ended. This looks like a nasty one, folks. The anchor went on to another story, and Jessica shut off the TV, then used her phone to look up more information. She spent a good hour reading articles about the flu, each one making her concern notch up higher than the last. She hoped Rochelle would change her mind and go home. An image of her mom popped into her head. Recently diagnosed with breast cancer, her mom lived out of state, alone. Jessica had already arranged to take time off the following week to fly out for a visit. She hadn't seen her mom in several months and wanted to spend time with her. She and her mom had always been close. Being the only child of a single mother did that sometimes. It was important to her to be able to give her mom the support she needed. Briefly wondering if this flu would affect her plans, Jessica shook her head. Surely by the next week, the whole thing would have blown over. It had to. "Mom?" Kayla said as she knocked. "Come in, sweetie." Kayla opened the door and sat on the bed. "What did Dad say?" "He's in a meeting. He'll call me when he's done." "But you told him about the flu?" Kayla's eyebrows tugged together. She seemed much more worried than she'd been earlier. "What's wrong, honey?" "Nothing. I mean, I just..." She frowned. "I looked some stuff up just now about the flu. Yeah, so it sounds like it's not the regular flu." That was the same conclusion Jessica was beginning to reach, but she wasn't about to share her worries. Not yet. Not when there wasn't a whole lot they could do about it. "People are working on it." "What people?" Kayla asked, her eyebrows tugging together. "What are they doing to fix it?" Jessica struggled to come up with an answer. Her phone rang, saving her from having to make something up. "It's Dad," she said, as she looked at her phone. Kayla frowned, then left the room. Chapter 2. Matt. The moment Matt finished his meeting, he went to his cubicle and did some quick online research into the flu that Jessica had called him about. When she'd asked him if he would work from home, his first instinct had been to brush her off. He had a lot of work to do, and he much preferred working in the office where he could chat with other developers. 3 things made him reconsider. First, Jessica wasn't one to overreact, so the fact that she was staying home from work gave him pause, especially since she was planning on taking time off to visit her mom the next week. Second, in the meeting he'd just gotten out of, half of the people who should have been there had called in sick. And finally, despite the fact that the media outlets were making a huge deal about this flu, he got the sense that maybe, for a change, they might not be exaggerating. Decision made, he picked up his phone and called Jessica, his mind in task mode as he mentally listed all of the things they should do to prepare for the possibility that they would need to hunker down at home for an unspecified period of time. "Hello," Jessica said a moment later. "Hi, babe." Without greeting him, she said, "The news is saying this flu is pretty nasty. Some people have even died, more than is typical for a flu." "I know. Are you going to come home?" He could hear the worry in her voice. "Yes." "You are?" Now hopeful disbelief. Matt scrolled through the long list of software bugs he was assigned to fix and tried not to feel overwhelmed. His family's safety had to come first. "Don't sound so surprised." "Okay," Jessica said with a laugh. "When are you leaving?" Matt turned away from his computer screen and glanced toward his boss's office. "In a few minutes. I need to clear it with Dan first. At least traffic shouldn't be too heavy." One side of his mouth quirked up. "True." He paused a bit. "I'm thinking of stopping by Costco on the way home to stock up on a few things and fuel up my truck." "Is that a good idea? I mean, what if sick people are there? Besides, we have that freeze-dried stuff you bought a few years ago." Several years earlier, Matt had gotten interested in emergency preparedness. So he and Jessica had splurged on a 6-month supply of freeze-dried meals for their family of 4. It still had more than 20 years of shelf life left, and it had been expensive. He really didn't want to use it if they didn't need to. "I'd rather not dip into that," he said. "Not when I can go to the store and buy what we need." Jessica was silent. "Okay, just please be careful." Matt laughed. "Oh, I will be." They discussed what he should buy, and after he disconnected, he talked to his boss and got clearance to work from home for a while. The drive from his job in Salt Lake City to the suburb where he lived in the southern part of Salt Lake County usually took 30 to 40 minutes. Of course, that was during commute time in the late afternoons. Right now, it was mid-morning, so traffic was relatively light. Was that because of the time of day, or because so many people had stayed home from work? Shaking his head at the idea that enough people were sick that traffic would be affected, Matt took the exit that would take him to Costco. First, he went to their gas station, and after filling the regular tank on his truck with diesel fuel, he folded back a corner of the material that covered the bed of his truck before opening the cap on his auxiliary tank. He and his family had a 33-foot fifth-wheel RV, and when they'd looked for a truck to pull it with, they'd found one that already had a 40-gallon auxiliary tank installed. Matt loved the convenience of carrying over 60 gallons of fuel when pulling the RV. It really cut down on the need to pull the RV into gas stations not equipped to handle such a large rig. The only drawback was the cost. Dropping a couple $100 on one fill-up was hard, but right now, filling the auxiliary tank seemed like the prudent thing to do. Once he'd finished filling both tanks, he parked his truck in the main parking lot. He was surprised at how busy Costco was at this time of day. Maybe it was always this busy. He'd never been there in the morning in the middle of the week. Besides, was Costco ever not busy? Wanting a flatbed cart to haul his purchases, he looked around but didn't see any near the entrance. He had to walk back out to the parking lot to find one, and once he did, he went inside and started shopping. Right away, he noticed something unusual. Where the shelves typically had plenty of every item, now the supplies seemed to be depleted, and there were a lot of people with entire cases of canned goods in their shopping carts or on flatbed carts. More people getting cases of food than he'd ever seen before. It looked like everyone had the same idea he did. Ignoring the spark of alarm that lit inside his chest, he focused on loading whatever cases he could get onto his cart, as well as batteries and toilet paper. On one aisle, a woman began coughing. Everyone backed away from her, including Matt. He not only backed away, he went to a different aisle entirely. Once he'd stacked all that would fit onto his cart, He made his way to the register. Long lines had formed, more like the lines he saw just before Christmas, and it was April. Squashing the trepidation that kept pushing to the surface, he worked to stay patient until it was his turn to check out. Once he reached his truck, he began unloading everything into the back seat. "Hey," the man said to him. Matt turned to see what the guy wanted. "I'll take that cart off your hands when you're done." Matt had other plans. "Thanks, but I have a few more things to get, so I'll need to hang on to it." The man scowled, but walked away without incident. Matt managed to fit everything inside the cab of the truck, and after locking the doors, he went back inside the store. To his surprise, it looked like the crowd had nearly doubled, and more than one person appeared to be sick. Hurrying forward anyway, Matt avoided anyone who looked the slightest bit sick and loaded his cart with more canned goods and water. Then he went to the area where vitamins and other health items were stocked. That section seemed less busy, so he had no trouble getting what he wanted before adding boxes of protein shakes, protein bars, and 2 large first aid kits. Then he noticed a shelf with 3 boxes of face masks. He set all of the boxes onto the stack of goods. "You can't take all of those!" a woman shouted as she ran up to him. He glanced at the pricing label above the shelf, then turned to the woman. "Doesn't say there's a purchase limit." She narrowed her eyes. "Don't you think someone else might want some?" Matt stared at the woman, then decided it wasn't worth it to make a scene. He took one of the boxes off his cart and handed it to her. She snatched it from his hand. "I need one more." Laughing at the nerve of the woman, Matt shook his head and walked away. "Hey!" she yelled. Several people looked in their direction, but Matt ignored them and went to another aisle, where he tucked the 2 boxes of face masks underneath other items on his cart so that they were no longer visible. Then he headed to the longer-than-ever lines at the register. He made it to his truck without further incident, loading all of the items from this trip into the bed of his truck. Glad he had a cover over the bed of his truck to hide his purchases from prying eyes, he climbed behind the wheel, hoping he hadn't forgotten anything. He left the parking lot and pointed his truck toward home. On the way, he passed a sporting goods store and decided to stock up on ammo for his .45 caliber pistol. While at the gun counter, he saw a 9mm that he thought was pretty sweet. Normally, he wouldn't spend that kind of money without talking to Jessica, but he decided to buy it along with a rifle. He could always return them if Jessica objected. Since he had his concealed carry permit, a background check wasn't necessary, and he was able to walk out of the store with his newly purchased weapons. On the drive home, Matt pictured the look on Jessica's face when he showed her all he'd bought. Was she going to laugh at him, think he was crazy, or be grateful? Trying not to worry about that, most of what he'd bought they would eventually use anyway. He continued on his way. Chapter 3. Jessica. What was taking Matt so long? It had been hours since he'd left his office. He should have already gotten home, even with stopping at Costco. Jessica tried not to worry, but her active imagination had Matt in a life-threatening car accident or some other awful situation. "Mom," Dylan said, "I'm hungry." Trying to push down her worries, Jessica told Dylan he could have an apple. Moments later, she heard the deadbolt unlocking on the front door. Exhaling in relief, she hurried to greet Matt, sliding her arms around his waist. "How'd it go?" she asked as she pulled away. With a wry look, he tilted his head. "It was crazy here." "Really? Crazier than normal? I've never seen it this bad. Not even right before Christmas." That concerned Jessica, because if that many people were as worried about this flu as she was, it had to be serious. "Were you able to get what you wanted?" "Yeah." "Good." They walked toward the kitchen. "By the way, make sure to wash your hands thoroughly." Matt grimaced. "Good reminder. I think some of the people there were sick." Startled, Jessica didn't say anything. No reason to get worked up over things they had no control over. "Hey, Dad," Dylan said around a bite of apple. "Hey, sport." Matt turned on the water, then glanced at Jessica. "Can you move your car out of the garage? I want to back my truck in for us to unload." Jessica's eyebrows tugged together. Matt never put his truck in the garage, mostly because it was too long. "You won't fit." He scrubbed his hands with soap. "I'll back in as far as I can. I don't necessarily want the neighbors to see all of the stuff I bought." "What did you buy?" Dylan asked, his eyes wide. Matt finished washing, then dried his hands on a towel. "Nothing exciting, just lots of food, and I'll need your help to bring it in." Dylan nodded. "Okay." Jessica parked her car at the curb in front of the house and watched as Matt backed his truck into the garage. Canned goods were stacked in the cab of the truck, and when he opened the gate on the back to reveal the rest of his purchases, she turned to him in shock. "How much did you spend?" He looked a little sheepish. "I'm not sure you'll want to know, but I mostly bought stuff we'd use anyway." He grinned. "Now we won't have to go to the store for a while." Jessica shook her head. "Yeah, like 3 or 4 years." Dylan lifted a case of canned chili from the truck. "Where do you want me to put it?" Matt turned to him with a smile. "Let's put everything in the basement storage room. And get your sister to help." That brought a grin to Dylan's face. "Okay." "Ask nicely," Jessica called after him. Then she faced Matt. "Do you really think you needed to buy so much?" Matt lifted his shoulders in a shrug. "Who knows? But when I saw the purchasing frenzy and the shelves emptying out, I kind of panicked." Emptying out? The shelves at Costco were never empty, except for that one Christmas when a particular toy had been all the rage, but never food items. Yeah, a lady even yelled at me for taking the last boxes of face masks. Jessica had trouble picturing a random stranger behaving that way. The people in their community were generally friendly, especially when they were face-to-face with someone. "Whoa," Kayla said with a smirk as she stepped into the garage and looked at the contents of the truck. "That's a lot of stuff, Dad." Face sobering, she looked at Matt. "Do you really think the flu is that serious?" Jessica smiled. "I think your dad went a little overboard." Kayla's face smoothed out. "Yeah, and now we have to carry it all the way to the basement." "Yes, you do," Matt said. "So get busy." Kayla rolled her eyes before hefting a case of canned green beans into her arms and heading into the house. "I'm sorry," Matt said. "I didn't mean to go so crazy at the store." He chuckled. "You should know better than to send me alone." Touching his arm, Jessica smiled. "No, I think what you bought is fine. I said that to Kayla because I don't want her or Dylan to worry. This flu scare will probably pass like previous flu scares, and we'll all be just fine." "I hope so." With that, they helped the kids carry the food down to the basement, although Jessica noticed Matt carrying several boxes of ammo into their bedroom. Curious what that was all about, she followed him. "I didn't know they sold ammo at Costco," she said with a smirk. He smiled as he put the boxes on a high shelf in their closet. "I stopped at a sporting goods store afterwards and decided to stock up." She shook her head. "Are you done with your shopping spree now?" He laughed. "Yeah, I think we're good." His eyebrows rose. "Unless you want to risk going out." "No, that's what online shopping is for." His face got serious. "That's actually not a bad idea." "What do you mean?" "We ought to see if there's anything else we should have on hand. You know, in case of an emergency." Jessica agreed, and once the truck had been completely unloaded and moved back into the driveway, she and Matt sat in front of the computer and pulled up Amazon. They ordered a number of items to add to their emergency stores, including a solar hand-crank radio flashlight, 4 portable water purifier straws, and 4 bug-out bags, each one providing 72 hours of supplies. "In 2 days, we'll be ready for the end of the world." Matt said with a grin. Jessica forced a smile, hoping that in 2 days they would be laughing at themselves. Chapter 4. Jessica. "Mom!" Kayla said the next afternoon as she raced into the living room, her tone nearing hysteria. Jessica set down the book she'd been reading and leapt to her feet. "What's wrong?" "Brooke's mom," Kayla said, as tears filled her eyes. Jessica pictured Kayla's best friend, Brooke, tall and slender with long auburn hair. She was a fixture around their house. Jessica didn't know Brooke's mom well, but she'd always been friendly. "What happened?" "She died." Kayla's face crumpled as tears streamed down her face. "Brooke's mom died." Jessica drew Kayla into her arms as shockwaves cascaded over her. "What?" She slowly pulled away from Kayla, her mind racing. "When? How? Today? Oh my goodness. What happened?" "She was fine last night, but she woke up feeling sick." Kayla's voice shook as she spoke. "Brooke's dad took her mom to the hospital, but she died, Mom. She's dead." Tears rolled down Kayla's cheeks. Astonished and rather alarmed, Jessica needed to know more. What did she have? Do they know? Kayla stared at Jessica as stark panic washed over her face. "The flu. It was the flu." Jessica's mouth fell open. It was shocking that someone could be fine one day and dead the next from a virus. "Mom, what if Brooke gets the flu? I mean, she was exposed to it, right?" Fresh tears filled Kayla's eyes. "What if Brooke dies too?" Jessica didn't want to point out that any of them could catch the deadly flu, and she had no words of reassurance to give Kayla. "What's going on?" Matt asked as he came into the room. He'd risen early and had worked from his home office all day. After hearing about Brooke's mother, Jessica was doubly glad Matt had agreed to work from home. Brooke's mom passed away. Jessica's voice was surprisingly calm. From the flu. Matt's eyebrows shot up. Then he went to Kayla and wrapped her in a hug. She lay her head against his shoulder and sobbed. As he comforted her, his gaze met Jessica's. Jessica read the worry in his eyes as clearly as if he'd said the words out loud. "I feel like I should do something," Kayla said, as she stepped away from Matt, her face streaked with tears. "What would you like to do?" Jessica asked. "I don't know. Bring her and her dad something to eat?" Jessica's gaze slid to Matt, who subtly shook his head. Then Jessica looked at Kayla. "That's very sweet of you, but under the circumstances, I don't think it would be a good idea to go over there." Deep creases formed on Kayla's forehead. "Right, of course." Relieved that Kayla understood, Jessica gave her another hug and murmured, "I love you, sweetheart." "I love you too," Kayla whispered. Then she turned and headed toward her room. Later that evening, the four of them gathered in the family room to watch the local news. Jessica sat on the couch beside Matt, and Dylan sprawled on the floor. Kayla, however, sat on the edge of the recliner, her back ramrod straight, as the four of them waited for the broadcast to begin. Moments later, it did. The first announcement was that the schools in multiple school districts in the state, including theirs, would be closed until further notice. It had been decided that since so many kids were sick, it would be best to keep everyone home. "No school?" Dylan said, his eyebrows rising as he looked at Jessica and Matt. "Whoa. Guess you guys won't be missing anything by being home," Matt said with a sardonic grin. "This is crazy," Kayla said, her gaze glued to the TV. "Crazy awesome," Dylan said with an ear-to-ear smile. "I know it seems great," Jessica said, "but remember what's behind it. People are getting sick." She glanced at Kayla. "Sick enough to die." Dylan's smile vanished. Yeah, I know. During the broadcast, Jessica kept thinking about Rochelle. After they'd spoken the day before, had she decided to stay home today? When the news was over, Jessica went into her bedroom and called her. Hello? A gravelly voice said. Had Jessica gotten the wrong number? The voice that answered sounded much deeper than Rochelle's. Maybe it was her husband. Is Rochelle there? It's me, Jess. Unease rattled through her. Are you sick? I should have listened to you yesterday. I should have gone home. I feel like death warmed over. Oh no. Have you been to the doctor? I have an appointment in the morning. That was something at least. I'm so sorry you're sick. You and me both. They didn't talk long, and after they hung up, Jessica called her mom. Bye, sweetie, her mom said, her voice cheerful. How are you? Half expecting to learn that her mom had caught the flu. After all, with the cancer treatment, her immune system had been weakened. When her mom sounded like her normal, happy self, Jessica quietly exhaled in relief. I'm good. I wanted to see how you're doing. Same old, same old. I spent most of the day working on my new quilt. It's coming along beautifully, Jessica. I can hardly wait to show it to you when you're here next week. Thrilled her mom was doing as well as possible, Jessica sat back and enjoyed their chat, still hopeful that she would be able to make the trip. That night, after Jessica and Matt got in bed, they turned on the news. As expected, the main topic of discussion was the flu that was sweeping the country and even the world. They listened in quiet horror as the anchor calmly announced that the fatality rate was climbing and that it was becoming common to catch the flu and die in a single day. That's what happened to Brooke's mom, Jessica said, barely above a whisper, as if saying it any louder would bring the same fate to their house. Could the same thing happen to Rochelle? Appalled by the thought, she decided she would call her first thing in the morning to check on her. Matt leaned over and kissed her on the lips. I'm glad you convinced me to work from home. Pushing aside her worries, she put her arms around him and lay her head on his chest as a feeling of safety washed over her. I'm glad you agreed. They listened as the news anchor talked to a representative from the CDC. Turn that up, Jessica said as she straightened. Matt complied, and Jessica breathed a sigh of relief when the woman from the CDC said that it appeared that the incubation period from being exposed to the virus to when symptoms appeared was 24 hours. It's been longer than that since any of us have been around other people, Jessica said. She turned to look at Matt. Does that mean we're safe? He grimaced. I hope so.